By the Waikato 22, Wiley, chance for the Wellington backs. There's Stuart Wilson coming in from the right wing. He's broken out of one tackle. A support here for Bernie Fraser. Fraser, first try of the match. It's 4-0 to Wellington. The lethal duo of the All Blacks wingers, Stu Wilson and Bernie Fraser.
Stay where you are. Don't move for around about half an hour.
These two guys together brought rugby into the public arena more than anyone had done before. Their camaraderie, their stunts, their humour gave them a profile that endeared them to all New Zealanders. But it was their magic on the field that truly entertained and enthralled us. A combination that became one of our greatest try-scoring partnerships.
Deans throws down for Loveridge. Finds Rollison well. Jefford left out. Robertson. Fraser in for his Wellington teammate again. Wilson!
There were times when Bernie and I would be swapping over wings, getting involved together because we didn't actually have to plan it. It just became a natural instinct. If he had the ball, I knew something was going to happen. And if you got involved with him, then he knew that I'd be hanging around somewhere. And vice versa. If I took off, made a gap, I mean, he would latch hold of me. And we had this sort of chemistry. It was a little bit quite uncanny. It wasn't planned. It was just sheer instinct. And because you played with each other for so long.
You can't put your finger on it. You don't know why, but it happens. And, you know, people say a lot of good things about you, but, you know, why and how, and I ask you questions, but you can't say, well, we practice it or anything. It just comes out. It's just friendships.
On the field, Stu and Bernie were separated by often 50 metres in their positions of left and right winger. But watching them play and looking back at the videotapes now, you often see that either Wilson or Fraser made play where the other one was involved. It was almost like their affection for each other, their mateship off the field, came onto the field. And many magic moments of their rugby career were made by one helping the other.
Loveridge away. Smith, Osborne, O'Carey, Wilson. Chipping out for Fraser.
Stuart Sinclair Wilson was born in Gore in 1954, but the family moved to Masterton when he was a year or so old. Sport was always his first love. Bernard Gabriel Fraser was born near Lautoka in Fiji in 1953. He's got Scottish and Irish, American, Samoan, Spanish, English, Hawaiian and Fijian running through his veins. When he was just 3 years old, his parents saved him from the crippling effects of polio. The treatment, an old Fijian custom each day at the beach.
Well, initially, you know, you'd think it's just a game. Your parents digging a hole and putting you in and then covering you up, and it's when they start running away and leaving you there, the panic sets in. You think, what the hell's going on here? So, you know, the great struggle begins and you're jumping up and trying to get with them.
They should have left you in there, mate, and at high tide.
You're gone.
Kicking out of that sand strengthened and saved his legs. Well, both were champion runners at school. Stu at Waitanapa College, whereas forte was the 100 and 200 metres. That's when cricket and golf didn't get in the way. And Bernie, whose family had immigrated to New Zealand and were living in Tokoroa. He spent his primary school years bouncing between rugby and league. He then became a schoolboy athletics champion at St Paul's College in Auckland. The 50 yards, 100, 220, 880, the mile. He was champion of the lot. And he was told he could be a world-class hurdler. But this was the game that got him. The white headband and the love beads were a badge that became instantly recognisable on a lot of Auckland turf.
He always laughs at this picture, but in fact, they were the most enjoyable rugby days of my life.
Any kid that can score 70 tries in his last year at college, 24 of those in the Auckland Secondary Schoolboys competition, he's a pretty handy player.
Bernie ended up in Wellington when he left school, figuring it was more like Tokoroa than Auckland. He played for Hutt Valley Marist. Stu escaped the perils of boarding school and left Brian Lahore country, travelling the Rumataka route to Wellington, where he played for Wellington College Old Boys.
John Heel. Wellington, half-back. Wellington up by 6 points to 0. And here's the switch here. There's a try on. It is with Stuart Wilson.
After a couple of years of great club rugby, they eventually played together for the first time for Wellington in 1976, though Bernie had played a few matches for the side in 75.
This fine young centre who's already scored one try, and Proctor going in. Here's Wilson again.
Stu scored 21 first-class tries in 1976, mostly at centre.
I enjoyed playing centre because you got involved, for a start. But when I thought about it, when I think about it, it was on the right wing where I did all the damage.
1977 was a terribly frustrating year for both of them. Stu, who'd finished the previous year with a great tour through Argentina with Maury's Youngbloods, was sidelined for most of it with an ankle injury and didn't play in this match against the Lions. He did get a trial later, though, for an All Black selection, but he played terribly. Bernie didn't even get that trial. The cold, wet 77 winter convinced him that it was time to head back home to Tokoroa.
It was just rain and cold, and you're running out in the mud and training out there. People don't realise what, a lot of people don't realise what sort of rugby players do, especially top line players. So, you're with club rugby, you're training twice a week, rev rugby twice a week. And plus, I had so many niggly injuries, and I've always loved Wellington and Wellington rugby, but I just decided, I need a change of environment, and I've just sort of had, just sick of it.
Stu, on the other hand, was lucky. Jack Gleeson, the 1977 All Black coach, had also coached the Argentina touring team. He believed in Stu despite his bad season that year. Stu scored his first test try in this, the second test of a drawn series against France. Bernie, meanwhile, was heading home for what he thought would be some enjoyable rugby years ahead with Hamilton Marist. So they went their separate ways after having played together only a couple of times. Who'd have guessed that they would revive that partnership? A partnership that would set this park on fire. Bernie's sojourn home was, for Wellington fans, happily brief. There was no way the South Waikato Rugby Union was going to let a Tokoroa boy play for a Hamilton club. So Bernie said no way, and he returned to play for the province that was showing more and more flair and initiative with each match played.
Fine running try it is, and Fraser scores it.
I remember one year we had a move, it was called Shimla, and there was guys running all over the place and crashing into each other, and during the practice there's guys lying all over the ground, and one of the guys said, "Is Shimla to a car accident?" But it's just, that's why I enjoyed Wellington, because guys, you think of the craziest moves, and we used to practice and practice and practice. And, we'd put it into practice in the game, and it'd come off.
Stu Wilson.
The partnership was now proving itself to be one of the most exciting prospects that Wellington fans had ever seen. And it wasn't only their try-scoring ability that endeared them to the thousands who crowded into the park every Saturday.
My favourite story about Stu Wilson concerns the time he played for Wellington against Southland, and he was tackled and a ruck formed about him, and he was thrown onto the bottom of this ruck where it collapsed, and he found himself with a big Southland forward's face right next to his. And apparently the story goes that Stu said to him, "G'day mate, got the time?"
When we first came into the Wellington team, you did an apprenticeship the first 2 years, you just shut your mouth, listened to the comedians, and then you learned and brought your own style of comic out. And, that's where the humour started, because, we inherited a representative side that believed in enjoying their rugby on and off the field.
Now if Fraser gets this, there's trouble. Mitchell lines him up. He goes through Mitchell. Here's a try.
I did a test match here at Eden Park in '83 when the All Blacks played the Lions, and the teams came on the field, and I noticed before the kick-off that Bernie Fraser walked up to the halfway line and appeared to be calling out to his opposite number, who was John Carlton, the England player. And it looked to me like it was sort of aggressive Fraser behaviour, perhaps trying to put the other guy off before the game even started. So after the game, I forget where I was, somewhere, and I said to Bernie, "Hey, what did you say to Carlton? What were you calling out to Carlton before the game? Were you, getting into him?" But Bernie said, "No, I just went up to halfway and said, 'Hey, John, how you doing, mate?'"
A lot of people thought they were clever clowns, but they're not really. They're very dedicated rugby players, and they've, there's no one more serious when they were on the paddock than Stewie and Bernie, and they hated losing as much as I did.
Fraser, number 4. Just like that. Bernie Fraser.
In all, Bernie scored 13 tries for Wellington that season,
He saw 4 tries scored by an Australian.
but he didn't make the All Blacks. Stu did again and found himself in some tough conditions, battling the Aussies. This was the second of 2 tests that the All Blacks won.
Infield to Stu Wilson. Nice little flip pass. Wilson still going and got there.
Greg Cornelson, number 8.
Man of the moment, 3
In the
tries.
third and last test
Harry
on Eden
Sear.
Park,
Mark
Stu
Taylor.
scored another great try, but unfortunately it was by no means a match-winning one. The All Blacks went down 30-16. The critics and the public had a field day. The consequences? A lot of new All Blacks were selected for the forthcoming tour of Britain.
Nice one, Stu!
Bernie wasn't one of them.
We knew that he was going to be an All Black. What Bernie had to do and what we told him, 2 seasons made of high-quality rugby, and you're in.
Stu, however, was a star performer in Murray's 1978 Grand Slam All Blacks. His try on Cardiff Arms Park is one of the highlights of his career.
They're only 10 metres from the Welsh line. Along to Bruce. Now it's Osborne. Osborne with a kick for Stu Wilson. Can Stu Wilson get the touch? He's going to be there first. What a try!
Donaldson, 10 metres out. Will they run the narrow side?
Stu dotted down twice, one in each of the home tests against France in 1979. Bernie wasn't there, and neither was he there when the All Blacks lost the Bledisloe Cup to the Aussies in Sydney. The Parade of Honour, an incident that Stu will never forget.
Well, the Aussies have always been great competitors, but they don't win too many times against the All Blacks, and when they do take a test office, they do this lap of honour. Well, I felt ugly. I felt really bitter that we'd lost, and all it did was just fuel us up for the next battle. I mean, the All Blacks have won game after game, and you're lucky to sort of even get a smile out of our juggernauts, and to see the Aussie team do a lap of honour for the Bledisloe Cup, oh, I tell you what, I just about spewed.
Another tour, the nod for Bernie. There were 5 Wellington players selected for that 1979 All Black tour of England and Scotland. But at last, the international rugby world, which had long marvelled at the skill of Wilson, was about to see that skill combined with the fire of Fraser, that uncanny partnership that had given the kiss of life to Wellington rugby for the last 3 seasons.
Dragged along by Stewart.
It may have been a long time coming, but it didn't take Bernie Fraser long to justify his All Black selection.
Now Fraser bursting through, and it takes an awful lot of red and white to get Bernie Fraser down. Robertson and Fraser's there. Loose ball, Fraser has away! Bernie Fraser in. Well, that was the second try for Bernie Fraser, who's come here with the reputation of being a big try scorer and has 2 today in his first appearance on tour.
I wanted to have a big one because, I came on the scene very late in life for a rugby, international. I was 26.
That's old.
So I had a lot to prove because that was the year I was supposedly going to be retiring and I became an All Black.
And look how Murray runs off that man. John Spears driving, 22 coming up, over the top, Loveridge, away to the right and running, done! Wilson, oh, a brilliant try, Stuart Wilson.
At long last, I knew that I had a wing 3/4 on the other side that could take a little bit of heat in the game situation, and as a senior pro, I knew that I was going to be looked after pretty well, but having Bernie on board and knowing that he could score tries, and he really did storm them over there in 79 and he became back a superstar.
Cleared again.
Both 1979 and 80 were tough touring years, but this uncanny partnership gave to the rugby world some of the game's most entertaining and enthralling moments. Well, this was a magic moment on Cardiff Arms Park for Bernie.
That jockey supported a whole lot of players. Jockeys.
They began to bring to rugby an image that was light years away from the tough, dour, Kiwi macho heavy that had epitomised the sport in the not-too-distant past. The opening of the Sir Michael Fowler Centre in 1983 saw these 2 teammates on opposite sides.
And there leading the Indians was the chief of the Blackfeet tribe.
Stu Billy the Kid Wilson had to take on Bernie Sitting Bull Fraser.
As far as I'm concerned, Stu Wilson and Bernie Fraser were the most incredible people to promote. They're an entrepreneur's dream. They had a certain magic about them. Somebody broke the mould after those 2 were made. They were the most accessible sports people for a radio person to contact and say, "Oi, how would you like to comment on this?" It wasn't always rugby. Stu Wilson would comment on anything, whether he knew about it or not, and Bernie Fraser would agree.
1981 saw the All Blacks involved in a record 8 tests against France, Romania and Scotland. But it's probably best remembered for the infamous Springbok tour, where the violence off the field was almost overshadowed by the brilliance on it.
So Wellington with yet another excursion.
But it was winning that log of wood with Wellington that gave them one of their greatest pleasures and one of their best performances.
Right wing is broken out of one tackle. A support here for Bernie Fraser. Fraser!
Bernie 2 tries, Stu 1.
Yeah, this is my second challenge in my career, and the only one that I've been in that we've been successful in taking it, and it's a milestone in everyone's career to take the shield.
Stu, I'm a bit worried about the wild man on the end here. Perhaps you could care to introduce him and interview him for us for this particular program.
Well, Keith, I don't know if you know this young character here, Bernie Fraser. We often have
Keith, what?
we often have a lot of fun with ages in the program, and
He's 34, I'm 23.
but I'd like to ask him, Bernie, how did you enjoy the game?
Oh, I went well, yeah. I thought you played well, though. Gosh,
And,
did really well.
What about that pass you dropped when it could have been 3 tries?
Oh, I knew you'd say nice hands, bud.
But Bernie had great hands and feet when this try entered him into Wellington rugby folklore forever. Bernie's corner was born. Jubilant scenes like this were now commonplace every Saturday. No wonder it's still recognised and revered to this day. In 1982, on the same ground, but not his corner, Bernie reached a magic tally. In the classic partnership pattern, he came into the line on Stu's side. Stu screamed towards the posts in a powerhouse dummy run. Bernie dotted down for his 100th first-class try.
In the Wellington team, the guys that we had with us, because we're together a lot longer than the All Blacks, we'd just go and do things which was exciting to the crowd. But then when we went into an All Black camp, sometimes Bernie and I used to say to each other, well, you know, the magic and the chemistry wasn't quite there, even though these guys were supposed to be the best players. And we found that in the Wellington team, there was more confidence in the back line to do things than an All Black back line.
In 1983, Stu, on a cold and wet day on Carisbrook against the Lions, equalled Ian Kirkpatrick's Test try-scoring record of 16 tries. It was his first Test try for 19 months.
When you go through a lean period, you begin to feel the pressure from the public, because everywhere you'd go, people would say, "Oh, Stu, you know, you're not dotting down. You know, where are these tries coming from, man? Where are they?" And so that added a little bit of pressure on you. But the thing was, it was the All Blacks and the Wellington team, the guys, that kept you going. They'd say, "Look, don't worry, it'll come." And of course, when it did come, it came in a flood.
Here it is.
He broke that record in the last Test on Eden Park.
Fraser in. Wilson. Here it comes. That's the record breaker.
Stu Wilson scored 3 tries that day.
My dear friend Bernard here that gave me the pass, which is a little bit unusual. It was only because he actually ran into trouble that he lobbed it on to me. But for him to give me the pass to score was a little special. And probably the highlight of that whole day was when I got a phone call from Ian Kirkpatrick, who held the record. And then I was now the new record holder. He rang me that night and congratulated me, and I think that was a little bit more special.
He's got Fraser outside of him.
To Stu, later that year came the reluctant honour of captaining the All Blacks on a tour of Scotland and England. It wasn't a successful tour.
Yes, that's a great try to Bernie Fraser.
As Bernie would say, I'm the most unsuccessful All Black captain ever. And that's a fact. It would have been nice to have won a Test. We lost one and we drew one. So, yeah, I mean, the honour is always there, but I mean, it's an honour that I didn't want, to be quite honest. I was just happy to be a part of the team, the clown of the team, keeping the boys happy, firing jokes, getting them up when they're... And we had a tough tour and we had a lot of down moments, and it wasn't up to the captain to go and gee the boys up in the funny way. It was left to Bernie. And of course, without the two of us, you know, the whole team struggled.
Looks like Stu Wilson's going to retire at the end of the tour.
He's decided to get married.
But what about Bernie Fraser?
That's who he's marrying.
Stu retired. Bernie was dropped from the 84 All Blacks and then recalled to Australia to replace an injured John Kerwin. He broke Ron Jardin's first-class try-scoring record while he was there. He played for Wellington until 1986 and his club until 87. He did the Cavaliers tour, and like Stu, accepted the royalties from their book, Ebony and Ivory. They were banned from rugby by the New Zealand Rugby Union. Why did they take the money knowing the risks?
Rugby has cost me a marriage, it's cost me 2 jobs, and this image that the public perceive of All Blacks, of doors open, red carpet, roses, jobs, that's absolutely Tommy rot. I mean, it's hard work, and when you finish your days and retire, you know, having played 8 years for the All Blacks, and I look back and think, great times, but what have I got now?
Financially, I've missed out on a lot of money through, you know, being self-employed. You come back from a tour, it takes you a couple of weeks to unwind, and you think about the tour, and then it comes back, you look at your bank balance, you know, there's been no money coming in, there's been a lot of money going out. So, you know, when it came up the chance, you either take the money or not. You know, I didn't even have a second thought. You know, to me, my family came first, so therefore I took the money.
Bernie's still in Wellington with Linda and the kids, still runs his carrier business, still banned from rugby. Stu's now in Auckland with Robin and Christy. He works in radio. He applied, his ban's now lifted. Bernie scored 171 first-class tries, a record that still stands. He still has his Wellington season record of 20 tries.
I'd love to have played in the World Cup because just the atmosphere of, you know, playing a test Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that, you know, to me that's fantastic, rather than sort of going away on tour and just saying here's a couple of games, whereas you're going away and, you know, there's so much going on and you're right in the thick of things, and you're not travelling around too much. You're enjoying the atmosphere of especially here when it was New Zealand, you know, the going around and playing all these different, you know, smaller minnow countries, and I think that's magnificent. And you know, it's one regret that I have, but you know, it was before my time, and I'm very unfortunate.
I don't think you go this one, mate. You won't make this one, mate.
I'm available.
Bernie had real magic. You know, you'd be watching him, and all of a sudden he'd do something which was, you know, exceptionally magnificent, and score a wonderful try or do something. He could turn a game in a nutshell, you know. Where Stewie would be more fundamental, I suppose, but he could score some great tries too.
Stu's 19 test tries was a record that stood until Kerwin broke it in 1988. Together, Stu and Bernie played 104 first-class games and 21 tests.
Regrets, not really. Maybe in the Wellington team, not holding on to the shield as long as we'd liked. We were a great challenging side. I mean, I think teams feared us because we could actually challenge for the log and go out and, you know, play well. But we had this inability to hold on to it for more than 2 or 3 games, and it would down south or just go. That would be my biggest regret, not actually having a season with the log at home.
Stu Wilson was one of the all-time great All Black wingers. Fraser, historically, was very near to that very high class. They were different players. Fraser was brutish, Wilson was stylish. Wilson would beat a man by twinkling feet and speed. Fraser would often go in straight through them, over the top, very aggressively. And they were a contrast too in their attitudes on the field. Bernie didn't mind stepping up if there's going to be a hint of a bit of trouble, whereas Stu would stay right out of it. They were, in many respects, a real contrast physically to look at and in the way they played the game.
In the annals of rugby, Bernie Fraser and Stu Wilson will go down as a couple of guys who weren't afraid to represent the game of rugby the way they felt it should be represented, especially at those after-game delights, the after-match function. But they'll also go down as a remarkable try-scoring combination on the field. Stu and Bernie, the uncanny partnership.